So welcome everyone, and forgive any technical glitches. This is the first morning of our new registration system functioning. And so some folks are still coming in and we're still working out some of the details, but it should work more smoothly. And you did get the information that the email would be sent before 30 minutes before class, but class starts at 9 with the Qigong. So the initial email with the Zoom code reminder was sent out actually at 7:45. So we'll keep getting that refined, let's say. But you can look for the email before the 9 o'clock class because there's only one Sunday registration. And today is very special. We had our Million Miracle Day yesterday, and we completed our Bodhisattva class about the Bodhisattva vow and the responsibilities, which concluded with the need for training. So in the last year, our Sangha has changed quite a bit in terms of how we functioned when I was away, different people taking leadership in review, Dharma review classes, and I think really a sense of appreciating what we have been learning during the COVID years with a sense of the need to go deeper in many ways, and as individual learners, deeper in perhaps slightly different ways. So today I'm going to introduce some new directions, and probably will be introducing this new direction over the course of this week and next week. Being in India also gave me a lot of time to think, and to think about post-COVID, as well as our learning system. So in terms of home base, or in terms of a touchstone, the 4 dharmas of Gampopa are absolutely perfect. So as I explain things, you can come back over and over again to what does it mean to study the Dharma, and it is expressed in the 4 dharmas of Gampopa. Our minds become one with the Dharma becomes the path removes confusion, and that confusion dawns as wisdom. Just like what we witness with the sun rising, our confusion is dispelled by wisdom. So the beauty of Buddhist training is that it's offered to each one in a way they can understand it right now. So that means the teachings are presented in a way that are accessible, and that accessible moves to definitive. So what's presented first is what is the doorway that connects people to learning and to the Dharma. And the example that's often given is there's a house that's burning, there are children in the house, and the father is outside, and the children are laughing and playing. They don't see the fire really. And the father gets a cart full of toys and he says, "Look, come out, I have all these presents for you." And then the children run out of the house. So in this example, we're like the children. We're in the house, we're suffering, our suffering is becoming greater, and we don't realize that we need to leave the house, and we don't know how to leave the house. So if the teacher were outside the door saying, "Emptiness, come get your emptiness," we wouldn't find that compelling enough to leave the house. So essentially the teacher is calling out, feel the heat, feel the suffering, get yourselves out of that suffering. So the examples that we use in the Dharma can only be partially effective. They can't give a full view. And so I think we easily react to that example saying, well, what do you mean we're the children? And, we're so highly educated. We should have the highest teachings first. I'm ready. I know that I'm ready to understand emptiness. Why are we starting with the foundation of the Four Noble Truths, let's say? And I think this is when our cultural expectation and our cultural habits start to cause a little bit of a misunderstanding. So if we think of how do we understand acquiring knowledge in the Western tradition, we think of, let's say, building blocks, and we think of how we learned reading as a child and how we learned mathematics. I remember in my childhood, the library would have a contest of how many books can you read? And the reward was popsicles, fudge popsicles. And there was a sense of, does a child understand vocabulary and understand vocabulary definitions? And how do we move to more and more difficult vocabulary? And in this process, there's a lot of praise for achievement and speed of learning. But in Buddhism, we might ask the question, we're introducing a new vocabulary word. How does that word change your life entirely? It is a whole different understanding of acquiring knowledge. How does that one word change your life entirely and affect how you understand the next word? Another way we can think about how we are defined by our culture is, for most of us, we learned spiritual teachings as children. And so there's a reverberation in our system of how we were introduced to spiritual views. So as a child, we were introduced to the idea of original sin inside and perfection or God outside. And we may have had great depth of spiritual teachings in our family lineages after that, but we still have a primal childlike response to that first introduction. Then as we went to school, we were introduced to the evolution of Western philosophy. And we might say, how is that defined in our modern world? And it could be, I think, therefore I am. So our sense of identity is connected to Western philosophy. The I-ness is our thoughts. And then in school, we learned about, you study humanities one way, and you study science another way. And with the humanities, we're encouraged to be very creative, to read a story and think about our take on the story, what we learned about the story, what we see in the story. If we were an English major, we may have written a thesis about our original thinking about a series of stories. Whereas in science, there's a very logical, proven evidence-based approach, very, very rational. Our emotions don't enter into it. It's what can we prove based on experiments. However, in both of these, there's a sense of achievement, of prizes, of creating a new knowledge within science, the Nobel Prize. And in every way, there's a sense of Western self-reliance and creativity. So as the science of psychology emerged, so did the self-help movement emerge. So how do we understand our emotions, and how do we create a system of belief about working with our emotions that has to do with that creative processing? So these are not concrete, definitive truths. These are some ways of thinking about how our culture defines us that may or may not be true for you, but probably some are partially true for you. Now, when we start learning about Buddhism, we're going into a system that has a different way of acquiring knowledge and a different way of understanding what fruition is. It isn't about achievement or prizes or speed. It's about, does understanding that one word change you completely? And the change is not one defining event. It's more like an evolving spiral. I have my visual picture again. Okay. So looking at this spiral, we could say one key concept, the Four Noble Truths, the first thing the Buddha taught. Historically, it was in a certain era, and we know that Buddhism has several different eras. And sometimes we put a name to the era. Let's say we could say the foundational era, when people studied the memorized Pali Canon. And then later in time, 1,000 years later, there was the Mahayana that had additional works in the canon. But these names really are not meant to be an era or a canon, because the complete teachings are ensconced in each era of the teachings. It's just, how is the learner understanding it? Are they understanding it from a particular view? And how is that particular view evolving? So if we go back to the example of the burning house, the children inside and the father outside, if we're understanding it from the view of, I'm suffering, get me out of here, it's hurting me, from the child inside, then that is that foundational view of recognizing that we are suffering, whether we're studying in the Tibetan tradition or the Pali Canon tradition or the Zen tradition. It is that view of get me out of here. If we are holding the teachings and our understanding in the way that our view is from the father's perspective, from the parental perspective, the children are suffering. We are suffering. How can I bring the children and myself out of that suffering? Then we're operating from the Mahayana view, whether we're studying in the Pali Canon, in the Tibetan Canon, in the Zen Canon. So it is an evolving understanding that makes sense, that starts right where we are. That first recognition that I am suffering, then gradually, as we study it and understand it and work with the Dharma, leads naturally to a recognition that I and all beings are suffering. What can we do about I and all beings? So it's not in any way right or wrong. It's more, where is your instinctual reaction to suffering? And your mind becoming one with the Dharma so that that instinctual reaction gradually changes. And what is really lovely and interesting is the perspective that it is said, what is the last 4 moments of conceptual understanding before full enlightenment? It is a complete, in-depth understanding of the Four Noble Truths. So that initial teaching of the Buddha becomes the all-pervasive understanding that is the final, rich, depth, complete doorway into non-conceptual enlightenment. So it's not like understanding addition and then you graduate to multiplication. It's understanding, let's say, the concept of zero and having that change your relationship to your life and mathematics for the rest of your life, and having that change your instinctual response to the world around you. So actually, we have been progressing all along. And I think each of you would say, as we witness the discussion every week, we're also witnessing each member of our Sangha gradually shifting their instinctual response to their life, their family, their community, from I am suffering to we are suffering, from I am suffering to how can I assist myself and others in this suffering. And it's because we have been focusing on aspirational bodhicitta, and that focus on aspirational bodhicitta and mind training has subtly shifted our cultural view from achievement and winning to we. Beyond an instinctual understanding into an actual life-changing, behavior-changing understanding. So I'd like to take some time this morning just to contemplate that. For many of us, we have been together almost 5 years, working with Shantideva's way of life, working with May all sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, may they have happiness and the causes of happiness. And there's a sense now that when there's difficulty or challenge in your lives, that there is either a process of the response being these Dharma-informed responses, or fully engaged with the Dharma informing your response. So I just like to sit with that a minute, so that in your reflection, you see that this first of the four dharmas of Gampopa, may my mind become one with the Dharma, has progressed, has illuminated your life, has altered your view to a dharmic view more completely, more richly, more deeply. So let's look at your direct experience of the four dharmas of Gampopa in relation to this class. How have you been moving from I to we? How have you absorbed the process of learning in this system? What is your experience of the four dharmas of Gampopa? So the first aspect of introducing this new learning system is really looking at how we learn and noticing that you have been learning in this system and that it's a different system. So I'm going to open up the breakout room so that you have a chance to just express with each other a little bit about that. Okay. So we'll give everybody a few minutes to talk and then come back together. You're absolutely welcome to just reflect on this particular learning system. So first of all, I'm curious to hear some of your responses to what are the difference in our learning systems and our understanding of really what learning is. So thoughts, reflections. Allison.
To me, it's almost like aging, where like it's a super slow process and you don't really notice it. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I'm older. So yeah, to me, it seems similar to that.
That is actually really a good example. That's lovely. Annie, you had your hand raised.
Oh, I was just going to say it really highlighted the different ways of assessing things that, we're so used to, and it's kind of embedded in our culture and our workplace of measuring by deadline, goal, accomplishment, and so as a consequence, the progress, I tend to see the shortcomings and the goals more than the progress. But I feel like I do have a better sense of how it is a spiral. It's not a straight line. It's a whole different layered, it's more about experience. And, I do see progress when I think about it. And I think it's important to think about it more.
I see a lot of progress. Kathy.
So I was really struck in our group. It was just a pretty common theme that folks have shifted from, like Annie was saying, this goal-centered stuff and, me, and going fast and collecting, to more of a process of flow. That was really highlighted. It was really wonderful.
Peggy.
Yes, last Thursday, towards the end of our session, Khenmo, you asked a question about Vipassana and Shamatha, and the whole rest of the class, I was trying to understand the question, and I wasn't even sure how to ask to have more clarification. And then on Saturday in our local Sangha, we watched some video teachings of Thich Nhat Hanh. And in the first video, which I had picked like 10 days ago, he gave the image of Vipassana is like one wing of a bird and shamatha is like the other wing, and they lift you so you can fly. and I thought, oh, that's what she was talking about.
You know, these images are just so effective, these images from the natural world. Yes. Okay. So this is a good a good beginning, just because I want you to understand why I'm creating a study system the way I'm creating a study system, because it is a different type of learning system. Okay, let's go back. I don't know how to go back to the spotlight. All right, so from a practical perspective, there has been, wonderful gradual understanding of bodhicitta, and that understanding is permeating into all of our lives. And we have studied very important texts. The Shantideva text is one of the most studied texts in all of the different eras of Buddhism now. But we have been studying just one verse at a time. And what I can see is there has not been a way to then organize how much you've been learning and sort of structure that in a more comprehensive understanding. And so as we move into the next few months, I want to work with offering both the Sunday Dharma class, where we'll be looking at one prayer at a time or one text at a time, but ones that illustrate particular key concepts. And then for those folks who really feel right now they want to understand more and go deeper, then I'd like to initiate a weekly study group that works with that prayer or concept that we're studying on Sundays, with additional readings, with discussion, and with a practice that is complementary to that prayer. One thing about studying Buddhism, it's more like studying a science. And so, as in studying any science, you have to understand the key components that construct, let's say, chemistry, biology, physics. We have to understand the key components, and then we have to understand how they fit together and are inseparable from each other. And at the same time, as we're looking at the key components, we are taking them in, not in an eclectic way, but with a clear, effective lineage pathway that allows us to become one with the Dharma in terms of this particular concept, and then the next particular concept, and then the next particular concept, so that there's a way of bringing together what we've been studying, now not just only recognizing that it's been a gradual change, like aging is a gradual change, but that we can facilitate that by additional readings, questions, discussion, and practice. Similarly, in the meditation, instead of doing multiple short retreats this year, we're focusing on the 10-day retreat coming up in September. So there'll be a little more practice on the weekdays, but there'll be one large in-depth practice in September that will provide the amount of time of accumulated meditation immersion to facilitate a coming together of the wings of, as Peggy was saying, shamatha and vipassana, but also study and practice. So in March, maybe in a week or two, we will have a definite time and place. The Tuesday, Thursday group voted on, okay, now we should have an early evening weekday, and we'll organize that. And next week, I'll talk a little bit more about the curriculum and the kinds of readings, and something more about the practical. But for this morning, thoughts or questions about what I've introduced so far? Big silence. So how many people are feeling they would like a more in-depth study and practice program? And Nancy, you had your hand raised.
It's okay. I just think for me, when I immerse myself in an experiential thing like bodhicitta, it's a heart-mind thing. It's not an academic thing. It's not a outside down thing. It's an inside out thing. It's an experience. The words are so repeated in Buddhism of true nature, but that we just keep repeating the same 40 words. but it is that kind of experience as opposed to other kinds of learning that we all have been through, But I think a group is wonderful, Khenmo. I think it's exciting. Thank you.
That's very true, Nancy. And in the Buddhist understanding, there was never a heart separated from mind. The words of the terms heart, mind are one thing. There are aspects of mind that we call feelings, and different kinds of conceptual expressions of mind, but there wasn't the separation of heart and mind. But the importance of study as support for the experience has to do with not mistaking the partial experience for the full experience. And how do we learn more about being unmistaken in our experience? And the example is buying tickets for a train. Are you going to San Francisco, Seattle, or Chicago? Defining what those destinations are so that we really understand how to unlock our full potential and full understanding. Other thoughts or questions? Kathy?
It was described to me, and this really hit home, is, like currently I'll hunt and peck. I'll hear a concept and somebody says, "Oh, this is a great book." And, I'll get that. And I think in this format, this concept of where we're actually, it's another spiral, and another thing like Gampopa's thing, where we're going deeper into something that's already there, and expanding outward rather than all over the place. So if I understand that right, I'm looking forward to being reined in.
It's a choice. It's a joyful choice. It's not a should.
Yeah.
It's forcing anyone into a class. I'm just saying we are opening another option, and we will continue with this class as well, seeing how the different Dharma concepts affect our daily life and our understanding of the meditation states, particularly bodhicitta and the four immeasurables. But I'm curious to see, are you understanding so far that we're really looking at the four dharmas of Gampopa as the learning system, and then within that learning system, how are we becoming the Dharma through more rich investigation? Annie?
I think that sounds wonderful, and I think any additional support that we're able to to access is really helpful. I was curious about the early evening Tuesday, Thursday session that you mentioned.
No, I was saying we did a poll in our Tuesday, Thursday morning class and voted for, instead of a weekend, like Talanka was always saying, the weekends are difficult. This class, we haven't figured out the exact day and time, but it'll be a weekday and not too late in the evening. So, all right, the key to that first Dharma of Gampopa, grant your blessing that my mind may become one to the Dharma, has to do with, the instinctual cry out. Something happens in your life, and, even as somebody in their 70s, there can still be, Mama, help me. What is your refuge? Is it such that your mind has become one with the Dharma, that in that moment, now you call out to your Dharma medicine? That's when you know that your mind has become one with a portion of the Dharma. John?
That experience when you hear a word over and over and over and it loses meaning? I'm there with Dharma currently. And the first two sentences seem to use Dharma so differently, I just get utterly confused. So I would like to think, after all of these decades of study and practice, that I know what Dharma is, but I'm lost in this moment.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, for you, you could just for now substitute bodhicitta. But that maybe become also just a word without definition after time. So that would be a good thing to really reflect on. What is the indefinable change that has happened to you over these, or let's say inexpressible change that has happened to you over these decades? So for instance, when I was a mid-career artist, let's say, I'd been studying Dharma parallel in the arts from my early 30s onwards. So by the time I was 40, without me sitting down and calculating, I had changed from wanting exhibitions and sales to art and hospice, art and medicine, because the Dharma had informed and changed what my values were in terms of how I even thought about my life and art and what I was doing with art. You can't repeat all sentient beings before every practice and after every practice without it having a resonant effect. Charlie, you had your hand raised.
Yes. So I'm pretty immersed actually in studying all the different pathways and all that academically and scientifically. But I think well, I do that all the time, but I would say that Gampopa's blessing actually comes through more as occasional, maybe more often, synchronistic and spontaneous experience.
It is a really pith expressed profound prayer. It's very true. So again, this is an invitation. I'm not assuming that everybody wants to go in this new class that's coming up. My hope is that many as people as possible can come to the Sharvasti retreat, because that's the extraordinary presentation of meditation that His Holiness has introduced. However, I think for many people, it would help to do more in-depth and more structure to organize what we've been learning in the last few years. So invitation, not a should. Okay, Annie, if you want to do the dedication prayers.
By this virtue may I achieve omniscience, and may all who travel on the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death cross the ocean of samsara, by defeating all enemies, confusion, the cause of suffering. Bodhicitta, the excellent and precious mind, where it is unborn, may it arise. Where it is born, may it not decline, but ever increase, higher and higher. I pray that the Lama may have good health. I pray that the Lama may have long life. I pray that your Dharma activities spread far and wide. I pray that I may not be separated from you. For this realm, encircled by snow-covered mountains, you are the source of every benefit and bliss without exception. Tenzin Gyatso, you who are one with Avalokiteshvara, may you remain steadfast until samsara's end. Embodiment of the three precious jewels, Padmapani, who holds the teachings of the victorious one, seeing the all-goodness meaning with the wisdom eye, may you who are spontaneously established activities live long for hundreds of kalpas. Noble Manjushri, the Lord of Speech, who manifests to hold the teachings of the Triple Gem, who raises the lamp of the sage's teachings. May you, who are the light of the Dharma, live long for hundreds of kalpas. The one known in the Holy Land as Aryadeva emanated into the Gar clan of eastern Tibet as Chidingpa, the heart son of Jigten Sumgong. May the life of glorious Garchen remain steadfast for 100 eons. We acknowledge that Vajra Dakini Nunnery is on the traditional unceded land of the Wabanaki Confederacy, the stewards of this land for many centuries before European settlement. We honor all Indigenous peoples' beliefs, cultural heritage, their relationship with the land, the knowledge of their elders, and the spirit of the ancient ones. This recognition of Indigenous territorial land and beliefs is a small step along the long road of recognizing the truth of our shared history and moving towards reconciliation. We will continue this journey with our Indigenous neighbors as we weave our paths together in right relation.
Okay, so wonderful. Good to see everybody this morning. And we will keep going with our wonderful Sunday class, which I can see has brought great benefit over time, just in the way everyone is expressing how it's affecting their lives and their interests. So take care and see you Tuesday, Thursday, and/or Sunday. And I'm looking forward to those folks who wish an additional, I think, if you say class, if you say study, it also sets up habits of thinking. But let's just say a doorway to a little more depth and structure of understanding. Okay.
Thank you, Khenmo. Thank you, Annie.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Have a beautiful day. Thank you, Khenmo.
Thank you, Khenmo. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Growing up, my goodness, look at you.
Oh.
Hi, good to see you.